Welcome to the Looking Glass Devadasi History Factoid series. What is Sadir? The minute you hear the name Sadir, you immediately associate it with the dance of the Devadasi. Now, the history of the name Sadir itself has not been very clear to us. However, Sadir was not the only name by which we knew the Devadasi dance. Her dance was known variedly as Dasiyatam, Chinnamelam, Koothu, Bhogamelam, Melam, etc. So Sadir was one of it. The Devadasi women performed primarily in temples, as her name suggests. She performed in also the processions of temples, in the Brahmotsavams, also in marriages and social functions of her community, like birth, etc. Teppams, Kartigai Utsavams, Sharad Utsavams, Vasanta Utsavams, Balidana Puja, so on and so forth. Because it was a temple ritual and a performance that was towards worship, several of her repertoire was also uniquely part of the ritual tradition, such as Unjal, Lali, Talat, Churnikai, Virittam, Kolatam, Padam, Kummi, Kuravanji, etc. Now the Devadasi, while performing Sadir, also had the duty of having to do the Kumbhaharati or take Mavilaka to the temple, sometimes make flower garlands, decorate the deity. So there were several different activities that the Devadasi was part of as part of her worship. The Devadasi therefore was known by different names as Manikam, as Nitya Sumangali, as Devaradiyal in the Tamil society. In the traditions of Sadir that I have learned with my gurus, particularly in the Pudukkottai and Tirunelveli districts, they have identified Sadir as Koil Sadir and Kottagai Sadir. Now, Koil Sadir is some of the repertoire that I just shared with you, like Unjal, Lali, Talat, etc., where the performance was entirely ritualistic. It was done in the temple and perhaps just for the deity often. So there are other repertoires within the Koil Sadir such as Kulupam and Kummi, Kolatam, etc. The Kuravanjis. The Kottagai Sadir was an interesting social element in her performance. The Kottagai need not only be the social performance, it could also be sometimes performed in the mantapa of the temple during procession and during festival time. But it comprised of other performances and repertoire that we today associate with Bharatanatyam, like Padavarnam, Tilana, Alaripu, Jatiswaram, Shabdam, etc. She also performed company javalis, notiswarams, modi, so many other delightful cosmopolitan repertoire in multiple languages, Gujarati, Parsi, so many other languages. My guru, R.Muthukannammal Amma of Viralimalai, very beautifully says that a person who is a Sadir artist is someone who can sing and dance as well as know the art of rhythm or talam and be able to recite the jatis and be sort of a holistic artist. So she says that song and dance are inseparable. So a person who sings as they dance is a Sadir artist. This is slightly different from a Bharatanatyam artist because a Bharatanatyam dancer invariably performs to the musicians who are singing.
அப்போ வந்து இவங்க பாட மாட்டாங்க, நட்டுவனார் வேணும், பக்கமேளம் வேணும், எல்லோரும் இருந்தால் தான் பரதநாட்டியக்காரங்க ஆட முடியும். பெண்கள் அப்படி இல்லை, நாங்கள் பாடிக்கிட்டே ஆடுவோம், தாளம் தட்டிகிட்டே ஆடுவோம், 2 பிள்ளைக்கு சொல்லிக் கொடுப்போம். சதுரில் வந்து இந்த ஊமை மாதிரி தான் பரதநாட்டியம். ஆனால் எளிய படித்து இவங்க கற்றுக்கிறாங்க, எளிய எல்லாம் பண்ணி இவங்க கற்றுக்கிறாங்க. அதனால தான் இவங்க கற்றுக்க முடியுது. ஒவ்வொருத்தரும் துணிச்சலாக நட்டுவாங்க பண்ண முடியும். சதுர ஆட்டி வச்சவங்க தான் ஆட முடியும், இல்லைன்னா முடியாது.
So Sadar artists are composite artists who perform beyond the repertoire of what we see on the stage, as well as are composite artists because they can sing and dance all at once. Welcome to the Looking Glass, Devadasi History Factoids. Who is an Isai Vellalar? In the Indian society, which is divided on its caste basis or the Varna basis as Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra, the Isai Vellalar community belongs to the Vellala caste as a subsect. The Vellalars are agrarian community and they fall under the Shudra Varna. Now the Isai Vellalar community comprises of Melakaras or all the percussionists and instrumentalists, Nayanakaras, the people who play the Nadaswaram and the Periyamelam instruments, as well as Devadasis, the women singers and musicians, and many other instrumentalists and performers. Basically all performing community come under the Isai Vellalar fold. Even during the time of Silapadigaram, say up until the 5th century of the Common Era, there was a practice of allowing the people from a certain community to represent ritual and worship duties of the entire society. And this community was identified as Suda Pauranika. Now the Suda Pauranikas were in charge of worship, and Devandi from Silapadigaram is an excellent example of a Kshatriya father and a Brahmana mother as the mixed lineage for these Suda Pauranikas. Now these members of Suda Pauranika community were also differently known as Shiva Brahmanas or Devakulam. So often when you hear the term Shiva Brahmana or come across an inscription that refers to Devakulam, you should be able to connect them to the later Isai Vellalar. Most of these people in this community were priests and priestesses, both men and women, who sang and danced in praise of the king and the deity from time to time. The Vishnu temple or the Vaishnava tradition had an equivalent of the Shiva Brahmana as the Bhatts. Sivaga Sintamani, a Tamil text, gives us a very interesting Puranic story as an anecdote that we can connect to the early history of the Isai Vellalar. Brahma is supposed to have possessed 5 lakh years of the power of his penance. Indra, who got very anxious that he was fast superseding Indra's power, immediately designates Tilottama, the celestial dancer, to go and distract Brahma. She is supposed to have come and danced around Brahma on all the 4 sides. In order to see her, Brahma created a head and a face on all the 4 sides. Therefore, he becomes 4-faced. And that is how this community of people who were born to Brahma and Tilottama came to be known as Nangamuga Nagapasattar. It's very interesting how this terminology is corroborated from the Sivaga Sintamani all the way in a copper plate inscription that we find later on, and now it is with the state archaeology in Tamil Nadu, this archives, from the house of an Isai Vellalar who lived very much in Chennai. This copper plate is often referred to as Karaikurichi Sepped. In this, the community is clearly referred to as Nangamuga Nagapasattar. So multiple terms like Shiva Brahmana, Suda Pauranika, Nangamuga Nagapasattar, Parasaiva are all the early terms by which you can identify the later Isai Vellalar community. Okay, so how did the term and when did the term Isai Vellalar come about? When did they become Vellala or the music or the artistic agrarian community? So all the way until 6th, 7th century even, we don't see the term Isai Vellalar as part of the Vellala community. But around the 12th century, we start seeing a certain change in the political atmosphere of the Tamil country. What happens is that the communities that were belonging to the Kshatriya, to the Vaishya and the Shudra Varna were rising in power and social mobility. By the time of the Nayaks, say the later 16th and 17th centuries, another shift happens. The Nayak are the Shudra Varna rulers. So from the Kshatriya rulers, we move to the rule of a Shudra Varna king. This really brings about a tremendous change in the social mobility of many Varnas and many castes. In this time, the Vellalar community really rises up in its social mobility and then subsumes many other communities under itself as subsets. One such, of course, is the Isai Vellalar. The Vellalar rose to prominence and the Isai Vellalar was subsumed under them. This is how we have to understand the continual history of the Isai Vellalar caste. Of course, post-independence in India, particularly in Tamil Nadu, the rise of the Dravidian movement and the Dravidian leader Kalaignar M. Karunanidhi, who himself belongs to the Isai Vellalar caste, decided to identify and put them in the community of BC or backward community in order to make affirmative action and policies accessible to the entire community. That is how the Isai Vellalar community, the Isai Vellalar caste, who are subsumed in the Vellalar community, a middling caste order, find a place as a backward community in the Tamil state.